Welcome back for part two and finishing up what Marxism theory is and how we can apply it to analyze and study literature. So, where the last video left off is based on the idea of not having money and how it can hinder or create inequality or barriers in your access to resources that are fundamental and important. And these are areas that can simply highlight that if you are wealthy, if you do have money, that these things can become very easy to access, and it feeds back into keeping you wealthy. So, I've got it on my dog so that if you hear snoring, you know exactly where it's coming from. Plus, who doesn't love a sleeping bully? So, when we take all of these concepts, the idea that there is inequality between the working class and the wealthy, what does that mean for studying literature? So just as we did in feminism, there are questions that you would want to ask. And these questions will help us when we're going through the story, after we've analyzed it, read it, know the parts of the story, that we can then start to look for evidence and we can look for concepts presented within the piece or the text. So here is a list of the questions, and I'm going to take you into the document that we were creating as a class to somewhat answer some of these questions. So just to go through, I know you're very smart and can read these on your own, but just to go through, how are class differences presented in this work? So how can we see wealthy, or the status of the wealthy, or the lives of the wealthy versus the lives of the poor? How do economic conditions determine the characters' lives? So if I was to look at this one, I'm thinking about Mrs. Summers, who has found money, and that we realize that for her this is a lot of money, and so the idea is that we understand her economic status, and as we look at understanding that she is not a wealthy individual, that we can then see her life as one where she has to pick lower standards, where she has to pick and choose between herself and her children. And often in her case, as we can see through this, that she has once and finally chosen herself, because most times she would choose her own children over herself. And this is her one experience where she's choosing herself and to spend that money. So we can see the emotions, we can also see how it affects her. So there's a number of other things and pieces of evidence that we can have in order to understand what Mrs. Summers' life is like because of her economic situation. Are the characters aware or unaware of the economic factors that shape their lives? I think she's very aware. I think she realizes as she's going through this how spending money makes her feel. And the question is, does she take that for granted? Or do the others who are participating in the same activities, but it's not necessarily a treat to themselves, that this may be just a way of their lives? Is she aware? Are they unaware of the impact that spending money has on their lives? And we can see this because in each situation she has an interaction with an individual and how she feels about herself, how she feels about the situation, all of these things. How is power, economics, conflict differences represented? How is the inequality represented? And here we have the access to goods and services that those without money do not have. Does the text criticize or reinforce capitalism or class? The idea of the rich and the poor, differences, or not necessarily the inequality, but the access to resources that individuals have. Do characters overcome the oppression in their lives? If so, how? And so when we look at oppression, this is not a story of Mrs. Summers pushing back against the man or anything. This is her own personal journey. So in terms of the conclusion, does she overcome anything? Or what is the conclusion? And what does that lend us to think about this particular experience that she's had? And last but not least, does the work propose some form of utopian vision as a solution? And so this is looking at the idea of how you would change things. Often sociological theories simply identify problems. They don't offer a solution. Marxism is one of those that does the contrary, where they identify the sources of inequality, but they also lay out a plan in which you could eradicate that inequality. And so what we did was we were going to do this as a class, but what we did instead was I simply posted this, and I will post it in Classroom, is that we took all of those questions, and then we're going to analyze and come up with some ideas as to how those questions connect or what they illuminate about this story. So the hope is that if this is Marxist theory, and then we're taking those questions, don't worry about the groups, just answer any or all that you would like to answer. If you can come up with some examples from the story, that would be fantastic. And what we're trying to do is allow us to understand what Marxist theory is. Conflict theory is something known as neo-Marxism. It's how, we're not just analyzing it from capitalist that we need to move into a communist society. Conflict theory is stemming from Marxism, in which we identify inequality based on income and power. And so we're going to take these and hopefully formulate an idea as to what this story is all about from a Marxist perspective. And I will post the question for thesis formulation for a pair of silk stockings, but essentially we're going to take all these ideas and formulate an idea that if we were to analyze a pair of silk stockings from a Marxist perspective, what areas of inequality would we be able to identify for the characters in the story? So I will post that as well, and we will be addressing all of these on Monday. So of course, just going through these videos and ensuring understanding of Marxist theory is the only thing that I really need you to do. If you would like to participate in these and add some to these, we might be able to use these as a conversation starting point when we gather together again on Monday. So please email me any questions. Don't forget to go through those videos in the slideshow. If you have any questions about Marxism, we're going to be going again on Monday, addressing it and starting from square one to make sure that everyone understands what this theory is all about.